We are now going to jump in and talk a little bit more with UNC Greensboro, Dr. Samantha Rayner, and I'm just going to prime your brains back with the bar graph from Titan Partners, a little bit about resource utilization and the differences that we're seeing between what institutions say they offer and what students say exists. Spoiler alert, we found some really interesting data around mentored students and resource utilization. But first, Dr. Rayner, go ahead and take us away and tell us about Greensboro, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vanessa. So for those of you who may not be familiar with UNC Greensboro, we are a regional comprehensive institution. We are a minority serving institution, and we're sneaking up on Hispanic serving institution status as well. We've been identified as the #1 in North Carolina for social mobility. Nearly 50% of our students last fall were first-generation students, or reported that they were first-generation students. We also have a really high percentage of Pell recipients. We're a high research activity institution, and we also are a community engaged institution designated by Carnegie. Next slide. Perfect. All right. So I mentioned that our program was focused on transfer students, so I want to give you a little bit of information about our transfer population at UNC Greensboro. These stats are based on last fall, but they're pretty consistent over time. So normally about 40% of our undergraduate population are transfer students. They look a lot like our first time in college students. Hold that thought in your head for just a moment. Large percentage of first generation and Pell recipients. I said large, but then you're looking at that percentage and you're like, Samantha, that only says 18%. Again, this is a self-report metric, so about 60% of our transfer students did not report at all. So I think that's higher than what we're seeing. Our students are largely studying full-time. 38% of our transfer students are students of color, and again, we're looking a lot like our first time in college population here. About 60% of our transfer students start at a North Carolina community college. That's great. We've got some system level structures in North Carolina built in for those students, including a comprehensive articulation agreement that waives general education requirements if students are transferring having completed an Associate of Arts or an Associate of Science degree. But that leaves about 40% of transfer students who are coming from somewhere else and may not have that same level of protection. Those could be coming from other four-year institutions or other UNC institutions. And then we've got an average age of 23%. So although I keep saying these students look a lot like our first time in college students, one takeaway I want you to have here is that transfer is not a homogeneous population, right? They're varied, they're diverse, just like our first time in college students, and they're coming with a lot of different kinds of experiences and backgrounds that are really valuable to them at this institution, but do make it a little challenging when we're trying to support them and their success. Next slide. All right. Again, this information is a little dated. We do the CESI, the Culturally Engaged Campus Environment Survey, every 3 years, I think, or every other year. We just administered it again, but this data is from the prior administration, okay? So we haven't parsed all of the data from last fall's administration. We brand this survey I Belong, and there were some really interesting findings when we started to disaggregate by transfer students. You see these stats along the bottom. The punchline here is students are not feeling a strong connection to our institution and not feeling a part of our community. So for transfer students who are already coming with imposter syndrome, feeling like they're different or they don't belong at an institution because they didn't start there, these are startling stats, and they were really concerning, and we wanted to figure out a way to better connect these students to the institution and help them see that they did belong here. Next slide. Perfect. So these, Vanessa, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this or not, but these are the two programs that we currently have at UNCG. Spartan First is launching in the fall. That's part of our QEP effort, and I don't have a whole lot of information about that. The program
Well,
that
it's
I'm most
awesome.
familiar with is Transfer
Yeah,
to Transfer.
exactly. And just for Spartans First, it's all incoming FTIC students paired with an upper division mentor with a big focus on holistic student care in the QEP. And Transfer to Transfer, we've been a number of years, and we have an opt-in of about a third, if not closer to half at sometimes, of the transfer student population. Trying to get the slide. So what have you learned, back to that graph, about the relationship between mentorship and resource utilization? And I know I have some graphs on the next slide, so let me know if you want me to jump to those.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and jump to those.
Perfect.
So we've been looking at our program both in terms of the students who participated and those who were invited and chose not to participate, because I wanted to understand a couple of things. One, what was happening with sense of belonging, since that's one of the outcomes we were interested in. One, what was happening with resource awareness and utilization, and then retention. So we're talking here about resource utilization. When we surveyed our students, so both the students who were participants and those who were not, and asked them to tell us in the last 30 days, which of these services have you utilized at the university? And there was a long list of various resources and services. One of the things that jumped out at me was that our mentored students had reported using an academic support or a service linked to academics at higher rates than our students who were not participating. So go back to what I said a moment ago about transfer students coming with some imposter syndrome. Sometimes transfer students don't know or realize that resources exist or that they are available for them too. The fact that these students had not only been aware and found resources, but were using them, told me that one, mentorship was helping with navigation. So our students were able to find the resources and connect to them. But two, mentors were doing an excellent job of normalizing help seeking and the use of those resources. So instead of a student who was already maybe questioning whether or not they belonged, questioning whether or not they could handle college level work simply because they were moving from a 2-year to a 4-year institution, having a peer say, no, tutoring is what we do. Supplemental instruction is what we do. This is how you get through these courses. It doesn't mean you can't do the work. It's extra practice time.
Yep.
Really was helping these students take advantage of those resources.
And just as a note, if you're interested, we did publish this in a peer-reviewed journal article with the New Mexico Mentoring Institute, and we collaborated with UNCG and the IR team to complete this study. I did want to note also what were accessed less frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's a couple financial aid. Six Tech is where folks go for support with information technology, computers, that sort of thing, and counseling center. So this is good news because students were able to find the information that they needed either on their own, maybe through their mentor, or maybe through another connection on campus.
Excellent. And I know that we're focusing on each institution in one focused area, but I'll also note that in the peer-reviewed article, we did see meaningful increases, statistically significant in sense of belonging and in retention as well. So lots of holistic pieces here. All right. And if I get it, are there additional ways moving forward that you're going to define success for this cohort?
Yeah, so for this program specifically, I mentioned it too, so sorry, I spoiled the question a little bit. Sense of belonging is one that we are looking at. I showed you the stats, so that's something we're really concerned about. Retention, of course. And then the third thing that really should have been an answer to your original question, Vanessa, is scalability.
Yes, true.
Because we don't have a lot of capacity and we do have a lot of transfer students, we need interventions that are scalable and that will reach large percentages of our transfer student population. So those are, in addition to resource utilization, those are 3 other areas that I'll be looking to define success.
Thank you so much. And we have a couple quotes from mentors, right? I can help in any way. I want them to relate to me. If they need a support system, I want to pay it forward, help someone else out that's transferring. Most of our mentors are transfer students themselves because, again, we have identity aligned mentorships based on what mentees say they need and want out of these relationships. And so when we send this out later, you can take a look at some of these great quotes that we get from our mentors as well.